blocking the camera from our featured guest here, but we're really excited today to have Mr. Dan Dunkel with us. Mr. Dunkel is kind of a unique, has a unique story, a unique relation to this this area. The first two folks that we've had, and they're both here in attendance today, Mr. Melton and Mr. Howard. They lived here their whole lives, you know, but you came here for a very brief, for a fairly brief window, 2 years, and when you were 14, 80 years ago, right? So I think that's a really neat story to tell, and he's got some really interesting stuff. But thank you so much for coming. And I guess we'll get started. Mr. Dunkel, just talk a little bit about yourself, when you were born and where you were born.
Well, I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, 1919. Lived there with my parents. My father died in 1926. Mother had 5 children. I was the oldest. And when I was, the time I would be in the 7th grade, my uncle and his wife had been married 2 or 4 years maybe, and they decided they could help Mother out if I would come live with them. That would save Mother some expense, because she was a widow woman with no special training or anything to make a living. And so I came in 1932. I started living with my uncle. And I lived with them from the time I was in the 7th grade until I graduated from high school.
And your uncle's name was?
Sam Nicely. And
his wife's name was?
Aunt Sally. I'll just say Aunt Sally and Uncle Sam.
They, a lot of folks in the community, I think, know the Niceleys, or know of the Niceleys.
You know, they were here for a good long while in the educational system in Morgan County. We left after we had lived here 2 years. We left here, and he was in a couple of other places, and then later came back and spent several years in Morgan County. He was the pastor of Liberty Baptist Church for over 28 years, and when he left there, they moved back to Knox County. But so they raised their family in Morgan County, Wartburg High School.
And when you moved in with them, they had just started that family.
Their baby was a year old or something like that when I started living with them. So.
And what was his name?
His name was David.
And did you help take care of David?
I was head of the nursery department. I took care of David in every way.
I was just going to ask you if you changed diapers and stuff.
I changed diapers. Not only did I change diapers, I washed diapers. Back in those days, you used cloth diapers. And it's amazing how much a 1.5-year-old baby can dispose of. But I did, not only did I wash diapers, I washed all of our other clothes too. We did a washboard, and I was the one who was handed to do the washing until later on they got somebody in the community that did that. And it was a help to this other lady, so they let her do our laundry.
So how long did you live with Uncle Sam and Aunt Sally and David before you came to Morgan County?
I started living with him in the spring of '32, and I went to school in Knox County 1 year, and then the next year we moved to Morgan County in the fall of '33.
And tell them about the experience of moving up here.
Oh, the day we moved was a very nice day. Uncle Sam had borrowed a truck from his brother-in-law, which was just a big old farm truck with cattle sides, and we loaded up the furniture, which was not a whole lot, but we got the furniture loaded in the truck, and Uncle Sam drove the truck, and I rode in the car with Aunt Sally, and I was David's baby's car seat. I held him. We left the northeast side of Knoxville, came down through Broadway, to Kingston Pike, and down Kingston Pike to Kingston, to Harriman, and on to Wartburg that day. We got to Wartburg and unloaded the furniture, set up some of it. Uncle Sam decided he needed to get the truck back to the farm that night. So he let me drive the car. I had driven some, not an awful lot until that time. But
and you were 14.
Around 13, 14. So I followed him, followed the truck in the car. We drove to Kingston, and the toll bridge was open, but he decided the ferry was cheaper. So we drove down to the river and crossed the river on a ferry boat, and told the ferryman we were leaving the truck and taking the truck to leave it, and we'd be back in a little while. So we got back, and he was waiting for us, and Uncle Sam drove the car onto the ferry boat, and we were crossing the Tennessee River there above Kingston. And the ferryman wanted him to move the car a little bit so the lights could shine on the part of the bank where he was going to be landing the boat. So Uncle Sam said, "Dad, you move the car." I got in the car and closed the door and pushed the clutch in and reaching to turn on the key. And about that time, I felt a bump like that, and the car shook, and they came running over. The car had rolled, and I was not aware of it, and it had rolled against the safety pole across the front of the ferry boat. The pole had stopped the car. And I think that's one of the things I can praise the Lord for. I wouldn't be here if that pole hadn't been there.
Quite a few of those. So you moved to Wartburg. How did that feel? How did you feel about coming to Morgan County? You lived in Knoxville.
You know, 14, 15 years old, you don't do a whole lot of feeling about things like that. At least back in those days, we didn't. We were, of course, you know, this was in the middle of the Depression, and everybody was in pretty much the same boat. Nobody had anything, and nobody paid any attention to it because everybody was pretty much the same. We moved to Morgan County, and it was a new experience for me, and I don't recall having any problems adjusting. Started to school, and one thing that was different for me at that time, and I don't know why, but there were we did not have water fountains in the high school. The old high school was set off of the side of 27 Highway at the edge of town. And there were no fountains, drinking fountains in the school, and so I was in the 8th grade, and the teacher would always send somebody out with a bucket to the well where we'd go to get water, which was a little piece from the schoolyard, and bring back a bucket of water and set it in the window, great big old windows with a wide windowsill, and set that bucket of water in the window. And the kids all made cups out of a sheet of notebook paper. And you'd get the dipper and pour your water in your cup and drink. Well, I didn't know how to make a cup. It took me a while to learn how to do it, but I finally did. I sat down just recently and took a piece of paper and made one. This is what it looked like. And you could pour water in that and take a drink. It was good for one use. You could fill it time or two if you wanted to, but once it's used, that's it. Well, I learned to make the cup, and I was proud of myself, so I went around the day. I'd been in school several days before I learned how to do that. And I walked around to the water bucket, you know, and got the dipper and poured my water in my little cup and was drinking, and I reached to put the dipper back in the bucket and missed the bucket and turned the dipper loose, and it fell down. We were on the second floor, and it fell to the ground. Naturally, that gave the kids something to snicker about. The teacher looked at me and said, "Would you like to go get it?" So I went down and got the dipper, and after that I made it well. Uncle Sam was pastor of Grace Baptist Church over on the Oak Ridge Highway going into Knoxville at that time, and on Sundays he and Aunt Sally went back over there, and I stayed at home to take care of whatever needed to be cared for there. And I came to the First Baptist Church at Wartburg to join the church, and there was 5 or 6 boys about my age, and I was in a Sunday school class with them. I don't remember too much about the class except that the teacher was absent more than he was present. And when he was absent, the guys would look at me, and because I lived with a preacher and a teacher, they'd look at me and say, "Dad, you teach today." We'd read the scripture verses and maybe the comments that were in the quarterly, and I did that. The first Sunday I was there, preacher by the name of Johnson, and I was going to join the church that morning, and he didn't give me an opportunity. So I was down in the altar of the church after the service, and he was talking to me, and I said, "Well, I meant to join the church today, but you didn't give me a chance." So that night he gave a chance for people to join the church, and I joined the First Baptist Church in Wartburg on that Sunday night, and was a member there for something around 2 years, a little over, until we moved somewhere else.
And you said you didn't, even though your uncle became pastor at Liberty, you didn't go there because he was preaching at different churches.
Uncle Sam became the pastor at Liberty and Crab Orchard, 2 churches that he pastored for several years until finally he ended up just at Liberty. But for a number of years he pastored Crab Orchard and Liberty, and spent one Sunday in one church and the next Sunday in the other church, and they always left home either late Saturday night and stayed in the community over at Crab Orchard, or then they left early Sunday morning. So it was better for me to go to one church rather than me going back and forth with them to 2 different churches all the time. That's the reason I was always in the church where we were living.
Sure. And did y'all have any kind of livestock or anything there when you lived in town? And tell them where your house was too.
We lived in a house, if you were coming out of town on 27, coming into town, right at the junction of Highway 27 and 62.
All changed a little bit since that day.
It doesn't look at all like that. I couldn't find the thing I remembered this morning. But at that time there was a store building that said in that, where they came together like that, there was a store building in that Y. And the name of the guy that owned the store was Glenn, so it was, I think it was called Glenn's Store, but it was just a general grocery store type thing. And we lived right across the highway from that store up on the hill. It would be on the left as you came into town. And the little lane that our house sat on ended up on at the school property where the old high school sat back in those days. And we had a cow. There was a little barn sitting down on that property, on that lot, that the cow could have some shelter at night. But in those days, cows roamed free. You had no fence law. I always thought it interesting. Cows go anywhere they wanted to, and if a motorist happened to hit a cow, the motorist was responsible. But you didn't hear of that happening too often. Somebody said, "Well, the cows decided highways were not a good place to graze." But the cows would graze, and you have to know your cow. And the way you knew your cow in those days was they had a bell. And almost every cow that people took care of, milked, they'd go out grazing wherever they wanted to. But you had to learn the tone of the bell your cow was wearing. And that's where I learned a little bit about how to distinguish the sound of one bell from another. And go out in the afternoon, hunt the cow, and bring her in, and milk her, and keep her in the barn at night, and milk the next morning, turn her loose, and they'd go out grazing.
What did you do for fun while you lived here in Wartburg?
For fun. You know, he asked me that at the house the other day. I had to stop and think a little bit because there wasn't any organized fun, but sometimes boys would get together to play a game of ball or something like that, but oftentimes nobody around to do anything with. And we had a set of horseshoes. We used to pitch horseshoes, had horseshoe pegs on the edge of the driveway where we lived. These were horseshoes, not pitching shoes. They were not, neither of the four were our same size. But I pitched horseshoes a lot. Nobody around, I pitched my right hand against my left hand, and it always came out pretty equal. I thought of something else that I did one day. Just one time I remember doing this, Matt. One summer, it was a hot summer day, and for some reason, flies were swarming. And I remember having a rubber band and making paper wads and standing across at the outside edge of the porch and shooting that paper wad against the wall where the flies were. You couldn't shoot without hitting one. I don't know, I must have spent an hour and a half or 2 hours out there one afternoon just shooting flies. I like to get out when nothing else was happening. I like to kind of roam up on the mountain a little bit. It was safe to do that in those days. I'd get out and walk up on the mountain some.
He said maybe it was called Wiley. He thought maybe it was called Wiley.
As I recall, that mountain was called Wiley Arms.
Is that what some folks call Bird Mountain today? Is that the?
I have no idea.
It is. Okay.
I have no idea.
That's just the mountain right here closest to
But it had a trail that went all the way up to the top of the mountain. Of course, the strip mining destroyed all of that when that came along.
Did you go swimming at all while you were living here in town?
We had a place out on what's called Potter's Fall, and we drove out that way this morning. There was a creek that went down through there, and one side of the road, below the road, there was a big fall that a lot of the boys would jump off the top of the fall into the pool at the bottom. I never did do that. I didn't have that much courage, I suppose. But up on the other side, there was some little pools in the creek where you could swim a little bit. And that was where I went swimming. It's the only place I recall swimming while I was here.
You would just walk down there from your house? And then...
We usually walk sometimes. Sometimes Sally would go and take David, and we'd have 3 or 4 or 5 people go, and they'd drive out in instances like that. But quite often I walked out there. Was there a big fire in town while you were here? The town almost burned down one night while we lived here. I didn't know anything about it. We lived out in the edge of town. I found out the next morning, been several of the high school boys in, and Uncle Sam, and they had been in town all night long moving stuff around. One of the hardware stores had a storage of dynamite. I remember them talking about they felt like they had to get that dynamite out of that store, and somehow they managed to do that. And they were back in and out of the house all night long. I slept through it all. I missed the whole thing.